"You'll be fine in the garage," my daughter said, throwing my things on the cold floor as if I were unnecessary junk in our home. She and her freeloading husband had seized my house, which I had built for years. I slept there for 2 nights, and on the 3rd night, I handed her a document that changed everything. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. Dad, we need to talk. Ashley's voice cut through the kitchen air before I'd even set the grocery bags down. "You're moving to the garage tonight." The milk carton slipped from my fingers, hitting the linoleum with a wet thud. "What did you just say?" "Brian needs a proper office space for his business projects." She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, speaking like she was discussing the weather. "The garage has everything you need. Electricity, that old couch, plenty of room for your things." My hands went still on the counter. "Ashley, this is my house." "Our house, Dad. We've been contributing to it for 3 years." Her chin lifted with that stubborn tilt I remembered from when she was 12 and wanted something impossible. "Besides, I already moved your pillow and blanket out there." The words hit like a physical blow. I turned to face her fully. Groceries forgotten. "You did what?" Brian appeared behind her, shoulders hunched, avoiding my eyes. "It's just temporary, Gerald, until my consulting firm gets off the ground." "Consulting firm?" I couldn't keep the disbelief from my voice. "Brian, you haven't worked a single day since you married my daughter." Ashley stepped forward, her voice sharpening. "That's not fair, and you know it. Brian's been developing his business model, networking, building connections. Real entrepreneurship takes time. 3 years, Ashley. 3 years of me paying for your groceries, your utilities, your car insurance." My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. "And now you want me to sleep in my own garage? Don't be so dramatic." She waved her hand dismissively. "It's not like we're throwing you out on the street. The garage is perfectly comfortable. I put a space heater out there and everything." I stared at this woman, who looked like my daughter, but spoke like a stranger. "Ashley, I built this house with my own hands. Your mother and I—" "Mom's been gone for 5 years, Dad." Her words sliced clean through the memory. "You can't keep living in the past. We're a family now, and families make sacrifices for each other." Brian shifted his weight, finally speaking up. "Maybe we could work out some kind of schedule. Like, you could use the bedroom on weekends?" The suggestion was so absurd I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I felt something cold and hard settling in my chest. A schedule for my own bedroom. See, Brian's being reasonable. Ashley seized on her husband's words like a lifeline. "We're trying to find a solution that works for everyone." "The solution is simple." I straightened to my full height, feeling every one of my 62 years. "No." Ashley's face flushed red. "Dad, you're being incredibly selfish right now. After everything we've done for you, cooking, cleaning, keeping you company since Mom died, this is how you repay us?" "Repay you?" The words came out louder than I intended. "For eating my food and living under my roof rent-free? We've been taking care of you." Ashley's voice cracked with false emotion. "Do you know how hard it's been, watching you mope around this empty house? We stayed because we were worried about you." Brian nodded eagerly. "Exactly. We could have gotten our own place years ago, but we didn't want to leave you alone." I looked between them, my daughter with her perfectly styled hair and manicured nails, despite being unemployed for 8 months, and her husband in his designer jeans and sneakers that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "Taking care of me. If you don't like the arrangement, you're free to leave any time." The words came out steady, final. Ashley's expression shifted, the mask of concern dropping away. "Fine. Have it your way." She turned on her heel and marched toward my bedroom. "But I'm not unpacking everything I already moved." I followed her down the hallway, Brian trailing behind us like a guilty shadow. My bedroom door stood wide open, and I could see my dresser drawers pulled out, half my clothes already gone. "Ashley, stop this right now." She didn't even turn around, just kept pulling shirts from hangers and tossing them into a laundry basket. "You made your choice, Dad. Now live with it." The sound of metal hangers scraping against the closet rod filled the silence. Each shirt that disappeared felt like another piece of my life being erased. Margaret's side of the closet still held her clothes. I'd never been able to bring myself to remove them. Now my daughter was clearing out mine like I was already dead. "These are my belongings in my house." My voice came out rougher than I intended. "Not anymore. Ashley grabbed an armload of my sweaters, the ones Margaret had bought me for Christmas over the years. You want to be stubborn? Fine. But Brian's business meeting is tomorrow, and he needs space to prepare. I stood in the doorway of my own bedroom, watching my daughter pack my life into boxes and baskets, while her unemployed husband nodded along like this was all perfectly reasonable. The afternoon light slanted through the windows, casting long shadows across the room, where Margaret and I had slept for 27 years. The milk carton was probably still leaking on the kitchen floor. 3 hours later, I sat on the thin blanket Ashley had thrown down, my back against the concrete wall. The space heater she'd mentioned was ancient, barely warming a 2-foot radius around my knees. Motor oil stained the floor where my car used to park, before I'd moved it outside to make room for their storage boxes. Above my head, footsteps crossed what used to be my bedroom. Laughter drifted through the ceiling. They were celebrating. I needed my reading glasses to review some insurance papers. The small metal filing cabinet sat in the corner where I'd kept it for 20 years, holding all the important documents Margaret had insisted I organize. You never know when you'll need these, she used to say, tapping the locked drawer with her wedding ring. The key still hung on the same nail behind my workbench. Inside, manila folders lined up like soldiers. Insurance, tax returns, home improvements, medical bills, each label written in my careful block letters, the same precision I'd used drawing blueprints. I pulled out the folder marked Ashley Support, without really thinking about why I'd started that file 3 years ago. The first receipt hit me like ice water. $2,047 for her wedding dress alterations. I'd forgotten about that emergency call 2 weeks before the ceremony. Dad, the dress doesn't fit right, and the seamstress wants cash up front. Another $3,200 for the reception hall deposit when their original venue fell through. $12,000 total for a wedding that was supposed to cost $6,000. More papers tumbled out. Brian's first business venture, $4,500 for premium marketing materials that never materialized into actual clients. His second attempt, $3,800 for industry certification in some consulting field I'd never heard of. 8 months ago, when Ashley lost her job, $2,100 per month for their share of groceries, utilities, insurance. I pulled out my phone and opened the calculator. The numbers climbed with each receipt. $23,000 during Ashley's unemployment, $18,000 for home improvements they'd requested, converting the guest room into an office, upgrading the kitchen appliances because theirs were too small for a family, $21,000 in additional utility costs, higher grocery bills, extra car insurance, $89,000. 5 years of quietly writing checks, transferring money, covering emergencies that never seemed to end. I'd told myself it was temporary, that family helped family, that Margaret would have wanted me to support our daughter. But Margaret would never have demanded I sleep in my own garage. The concrete seeped cold through the blanket, and I could hear Brian's voice above, probably explaining his latest business plan to Ashley. Something about digital marketing or cryptocurrency or whatever had caught his attention this week. The same eager tone he'd used when asking for the certification money, the marketing materials, the investment opportunities that were going to change everything. I stacked the receipts in chronological order, watching the progression from reasonable requests to obvious exploitation. The pattern was clear now, written in my own careful notations on each check stub. Ashley's car repair, Brian's business expenses, emergency dental work. Each excuse had seemed legitimate at the time. Footsteps crossed overhead again, heading toward what used to be my side of the house. The bathroom door slammed. Water ran through pipes that I'd installed myself when Margaret was pregnant with Ashley, back when we dreamed about grandchildren running through these rooms. I gathered the receipts and slid them into a clean envelope. $89,000 bought a lot of things, but apparently not respect or gratitude. My fingers traced the concrete wall behind me, feeling every bump and imperfection. Tomorrow, I would start making some changes. The filing cabinet had more folders I hadn't looked at in years. By 2 a.m, I'd cleared the entire workbench. Financial documents lay organized in precise rows, each receipt and bank statement arranged chronologically. $89,000 of evidence spread across 27 years of construction experience. I pulled down the thick binder labeled Legal References from the shelf above my tools. 25 years of running Nelson Construction had taught me more than foundation pours and electrical codes. Contracts, liens, property law, tenant rights, all part of the business. Ohio Revised Code, Section 5321 opened to exactly what I needed. A landlord may terminate a periodic tenancy by notice given the tenant. The words felt solid under my reading glasses. 30 days, written notice, no cause required when there's no written lease agreement. Ashley and Brian had never signed anything official. 3 years of handshake agreements and assumed arrangements. I reached for my yellow legal pad and started writing. Phase 1, documentation. Already complete. Phase 2, legal notification. Required 30 days minimum. Phase 3, implementation. The house blueprints came next, unrolled across the clean surface. Every room marked in my careful drafting pencil from 1998. Master bedroom, guest room, converted to Brian's office. Kitchen they'd demanded I upgrade. Property I'd designed, built, and paid for entirely. Margaret's voice echoed from somewhere in my memory. Keep good records, Gerald. You never know when you'll need proof. Smart woman, always thinking ahead. I flipped through the construction law manual to the section on property ownership rights. Occupancy agreements versus rental contracts, resident versus tenant classifications, family member exemptions and their limitations. Brian qualified as neither family nor legal tenant. My engineering notebook lay open beside the legal texts, equations, and stress calculations, giving way to a different kind of problem solving. Variables and constants, known quantities and optimal solutions. The same methodical approach that had built 37 houses now applied to dismantling their comfortable arrangement. Variable 1, financial dependency. They'd grown accustomed to my support, structured their entire lifestyle around it. Remove the foundation. Watch the structure collapse. Variable 2, legal standing. No written lease meant no tenant protections. They were guests who'd overstayed their welcome. Variable 3, emotional manipulation. Ashley's primary weapon, but ineffective against documented evidence. I opened my laptop and found the word processor. The eviction notice template loaded slowly, official language filling the screen, blanks for names, dates, legal justifications, standard form I'd used twice before with problem tenants and rental properties. Take notice that your tenancy of the above described premises is hereby terminated 30 days from the date of service of this notice. Clean, professional, legally binding. The printer hummed to life, feeding paper through mechanisms I'd maintained myself for 12 years. Black text appeared line by line, creating the first tool in my systematic approach. Outside, dawn crept across the suburban street, casting long shadows through the garage door windows. Inside the house, Ashley and Brian slept soundly in what they assumed was their permanent arrangement. I folded the notice carefully and slipped it into an envelope marked with Ashley's legal name, first official document in what would become a comprehensive case file. The filing cabinet's bottom drawer held my old business Rolodex. Lawyer contacts, county officials, professional connections from 3 decades of construction work. People who knew my reputation, understood the value of proper documentation and legal procedures. Robert Stevens answered on the second ring, despite the early hour. Gerald, what's got you calling before sunrise? 5 hours later, I sat across from Robert Stevens in his downtown Columbus office, watching him arrange my financial documentation across his mahogany desk. The same methodical precision I'd used organizing receipts in the garage, now applied by someone who understood exactly what these numbers meant in legal terms. $89,000 over 5 years. Robert's finger traced down my calculated totals, plus documented property improvements they requested. No written lease agreement, no established tenancy terms. The leather briefcase I'd carried from my car sat open beside my chair, containing copies of everything. Bank statements, receipts, home improvement records, even photographs of the garage conversion Ashley had demanded I make more comfortable for my new living situation. Robert's office felt solid around us, law books lining the walls, framed Ohio bar certifications, case files stacked with the same organized efficiency I recognized from the construction project management. 27 years of building houses had taught me to recognize competent professionals. Property law in Ohio strongly favors owners in situations like this. Stevens pulled a thick volume from the shelf behind his desk. Ohio Revised Code. Section 5321.17 specifically addresses month-to-month occupancy termination. He opened to a marked page, pointing to highlighted text. 30 days written notice. No cause required when there's no formal lease. Since you're the sole property owner and they've never paid rent or signed any agreement, they're legally classified as guests, not tenants. I watched him pull forms from a filing cabinet, official documents with county headers and legal seals. The same attention to detail I'd applied to building permits and inspection schedules, now focused on reclaiming my own house. The financial exploitation angle strengthens your position considerably. Robert spread my receipts in chronological order. Courts recognize patterns of abuse, especially when there's clear documentation of escalating demands. My engineering notebook lay open beside the legal texts, my systematic timeline matching perfectly with his professional assessment. Problem identification, resource analysis, solution implementation, the same process that had built 37 homes over 3 decades. How long does the process take? I asked, watching him organize official forms into a case file. Minimum 30 days from notice delivery to sheriff enforcement, assuming they don't comply voluntarily. Stevens reached for his calculator, running numbers with the same precision I'd used on construction budgets. Legal fees run approximately $2,800 for the complete process, including court filings and enforcement coordination. Less than I'd spent on Brian's failed business ventures last year alone. Robert's printer hummed to life, feeding official notices through mechanisms I recognized from my own home office equipment. Black text appeared line by line, creating the legal framework that would restore order to my property. Notice to terminate tenancy appeared at the top of the first page, followed by my name as property owner and Ashley Nelson Cooper as occupant. Clean, professional language that transformed emotional betrayal into actionable legal remedy. I can have these prepared for delivery by this afternoon. Stevens organized the documents into manila folders labeled with case numbers and filing dates. Service must be performed according to Ohio statutes, either personal delivery with witness or certified mail with return receipt. The second form outlined eviction procedures, timeline requirements, and sheriff's department contact information. Everything I needed to reclaim my bedroom, my dignity, and my household from 3 years of gradual exploitation. Stevens handed me a business card with his direct phone number written on the back. Call immediately if they attempt any interference or retaliation. Property owners have significant legal protections in Ohio, but documentation of any harassment strengthens our position. I stood, gathering my organized evidence back into the briefcase, feeling the weight of legal backing behind every document. The same confidence I'd carried walking onto construction sites, knowing I had the expertise and resources to build something solid and lasting. The parking meter outside still had 40 minutes remaining when I reached my car. Legal notices secured in a sealed envelope marked "Personal Service Required." 27 years of construction work had taught me that the foundation determines everything else about a building. Time to rebuild mine. The kitchen counter still held breakfast dishes when I walked through the garage door, envelope in hand. Ashley sat at the table where Margaret and I had shared 27 years of morning coffee, scrolling through her phone with the casual confidence of someone who believed she'd won a permanent victory. "Dad, you're back early." She didn't look up from her screen. "I thought you'd spend the whole day sulking in your little workshop." I set the sealed envelope on the counter between us, my name printed in Robert Stevens's precise legal script across the front. Actually, I spent the morning taking care of some business. Brian appeared in the doorway, wearing one of the expensive polo shirts I'd paid for during his last networking phase. His eyes shifted between the envelope and my face, sensing something different in my demeanor, but unable to identify the change. What kind of business? Ashley finally glanced up, her tone carrying that familiar edge of condescension she'd perfected over the past 3 years. I opened the envelope methodically, unfolding the official document with the same precision I'd used reviewing construction blueprints. This is your 30-day notice to quit and deliver possession of the premises." The words hit the air like concrete settling into place. Ashley's phone slipped from her fingers onto the table. "What did you just say?" "Legal eviction proceedings under Ohio Revised Code, Section 5321. I held the document where she could see the official letterhead, the county seal, the formal legal language that transformed family dispute into judicial remedy. "You have 30 days to vacate my property." Brian stepped forward, his face pale. "Gerald, you can't be serious about this. Failure to comply will result in Sheriff's Department enforcement." I continued reading from the notice, my voice steady as architectural specifications. "All legal requirements have been satisfied under Ohio landlord-tenant law." Ashley snatched the paper from my hands, her eyes scanning the text with growing desperation. "This is ridiculous. We're not tenants. We're family. You can't evict your own daughter." "Actually, I can." I pulled out the second document Robert had prepared, a legal summary of property owner rights. "You've never paid rent, never signed a lease agreement, never established legal tenancy. Under Ohio law, you're classified as guests who've overstayed their welcome." The blood drained from Ashley's face as she read the formal legal language. Her hands trembled slightly, making the paper rustle like autumn leaves. "Brian, tell him this won't hold up in court." Brian looked between us like a spectator at a tennis match, clearly out of his depth. "Maybe we could work out some kind of arrangement? I mean, we've been contributing to the household." $89,000. I let the number settle into the silence. "That's what I've contributed to your household over 5 years. Documentation is attached to your copy of the eviction notice." Ashley's eyes widened as she flipped through the pages, seeing her wedding expenses, Brian's failed business investments, months of unemployment support, all organized with engineering precision. "You kept track of everything?" "Construction projects require detailed financial records." I straightened the papers she'd scattered across the table. "Legal proceedings require the same documentation standards." She tried her old manipulation tactics, softening her voice into the tone that used to make me reach for my checkbook. "Daddy, this isn't who you are. We're going through a rough patch, but families don't throw each other out on the street. Families don't force their fathers to sleep in garages either." I collected the documents, slipping them back into their official envelope. "The notice has been served. 30 days from today's date." Brian cleared his throat nervously. "What if we started paying rent? Would that change the legal situation?" "The eviction notice is final." I headed toward the garage door, feeling the weight of legal authority behind every step. "Any questions about the process should be directed to Robert Stevens at the number listed on your copy." Ashley's voice cracked behind me. "You're really going to throw out your own grandchild?" I paused in the doorway, remembering Tommy's toys scattered across the living room, the same room where Ashley had demanded I surrender my bedroom. "Tommy will always be welcome in my house. His parents have 30 days to find their own." The garage door closed behind me with a solid click. Above my head, Ashley's voice rose to near hysteria, punctuated by Brian's ineffective attempts at damage control. 30 days to watch them scramble. I'd built this timeline to last. Through the garage door, Ashley's voice cracked with the first notes of manufactured desperation. "Daddy, please, just come back inside and let's talk about this reasonably." I stepped back into the kitchen, watching her arrange her features into the wounded expression that had worked so effectively during her teenage years. 27 years of running construction projects had taught me to recognize performance when contractors tried to renegotiate after signing contracts. "There's nothing reasonable to discuss." I kept my voice level, the same tone I'd used explaining change orders to unhappy clients. "The legal notice has been served." Her eyes filled with practiced tears. "How can you throw away everything we've meant to each other? I'm your daughter, your only child. Which is why this conversation should never have been necessary." I reached for the coffee pot, maintaining the casual routine that drove home my emotional detachment. Business decisions don't change based on family relationships. Brian shifted nervously behind her, clearly uncomfortable with the manipulations tactics, but lacking any alternative strategy. "Gerald, surely we can work something out. Maybe a payment plan or—" "The eviction notice is final." I poured coffee into my favorite mug, the one Margaret had given me for our 10th anniversary. "Any further discussion should be with Robert Stevens." Ashley's manufactured vulnerability shifted toward guilty desperation. Mom would be heartbroken to see you treating her daughter this way. She always said, family comes first. I set the coffee mug down with deliberate care, remembering Margaret's actual words about Ashley's escalating demands during college. Your mother also said I should stop enabling your irresponsible behavior. Her exact words were, tough love builds character. The truth hit Ashley like a missed deadline hitting a construction schedule. Her carefully orchestrated tears faltered, replaced by something closer to genuine panic. You're rewriting history to justify being cruel. I'm applying the same business principles I've used for 30 years. I leaned against the counter where I'd organized receipts just 2 nights ago. Emotional appeals don't override legal obligations. She tried switching tactics, reaching for the nuclear option of family guilt. So, this is it? You're willing to destroy our relationship forever over money? You destroyed our relationship when you demanded I sleep in my own garage. Each word came out clean and precise, construction-grade steel in verbal form. I'm simply formalizing the arrangement you initiated. Brian finally found his voice, though it carried no real authority. What about Tommy? He'll grow up remembering that his grandfather threw his family out. Tommy will remember that his grandfather maintained his dignity. I straightened the legal papers Ashley had scattered across the table. He'll also remember which parent provided financial stability versus which ones lived as dependents. Ashley's control cracked completely, revealing the genuine fear beneath her performance. We have nowhere else to go. Do you understand that? Nowhere. You've had 3 years to develop somewhere else to go. I checked my watch with the same precision I'd used managing construction timelines. 29 days and 14 hours remaining. Her voice climbed toward hysteria. This isn't the father who taught me to ride a bicycle. This isn't the man who walked me down the aisle. That father also paid $12,000 for your wedding. I opened the legal folder, pulling out specific receipts. This man is the same one who's documented every financial sacrifice with engineering precision. She grabbed my arm, her fingernails digging into skin weathered by decades of construction work. Please, Daddy, I'm begging you, don't do this to us. I looked down at her hand, the same hand that had demanded I move to the garage, that had dismissed my concerns about Brian's employment, that had treated my checkbook like an unlimited resource. 30 years of construction negotiations had taught me that successful manipulation required emotional engagement. I felt nothing but professional recognition of desperate tactics. The notice period begins today. I gently removed her hand from my arm. Any violation of the terms will result in immediate sheriff's enforcement. Ashley's face cycled through shock, rage, and something approaching genuine despair before settling on cold calculation. Her manipulation performance had failed completely, leaving her with no familiar weapons. For the first time in 3 years, she looked at me like I was a stranger. Fine. Her voice carried a different quality now, harder and more dangerous. If that's how you want to play this game, the word game hung in the air like sawdust after a badly measured cut. Something in her expression told me the rules were about to change. Ashley stepped closer to Brian, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper that carried just enough volume for me to catch fragments. Show him we're serious. Can't let him think. Needs to understand. Brian's shoulders tensed as her instructions registered. He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight like a contractor trying to avoid discussing cost overruns. But Ashley's desperation had found a new target, and she pushed harder. You're bigger than him, Brian. He's 62 years old. I continued organizing the legal papers with deliberate calm, watching peripherally as Brian tried to summon intimidation he'd never needed before. 30 years on construction sites had taught me to recognize genuine threats versus amateur posturing. He took a step forward, clearing his throat with artificial authority. Gerald, maybe you should reconsider this whole eviction thing. You don't want this situation to get unpleasant. I looked up from the documents, studying Brian's awkward attempt at menace. Unpleasant how, exactly? Look, I'm trying to be reasonable here. His voice carried the forced confidence of someone reading from a script Ashley had hastily written. But if you keep pushing this legal nonsense, things might get complicated. Complicated. I set down my pen and turned to face him fully. Are you threatening me in my own house, Brian? The question hung between us like dust settling after a poorly measured cut. Brian's face flushed, caught between Ashley's pressure and his own discomfort with the role she'd assigned him. I'm just saying, maybe you should think about what's best for everyone. He stepped closer, trying to use his height advantage. You're outnumbered here, Gerald. I almost smiled. Outnumbered by whom? You. 27 years of managing construction crews had included more physical confrontations than Brian had probably seen in movies. Drunk electricians who thought their paychecks were too small. Concrete finishers who wanted to renegotiate timelines after materials were delivered. Subcontractors who believed intimidation worked better than conversation. I'd handled them all without breaking a sweat. Brian, you've never thrown a punch in your life. I kept my voice conversational, the same tone I'd used explaining why certain walls couldn't be moved. You've never worked a job where men settle disagreements with anything besides words and lawyers. His confidence wavered visibly. That doesn't mean I won't. What? Hit a 62-year-old man? I stepped forward, closing the distance he'd tried to establish. In front of your wife and child? The movement was subtle but effective. A lifetime of dealing with aggressive men had taught me how to project authority without aggression. Brian instinctively stepped back, his amateur intimidation dissolving like sugar in rain. I've been handling bigger threats than you during coffee breaks for 3 decades. I kept moving forward until Brian retreated against the kitchen counter. Angry men with real grievances, real desperation, and actual experience with violence. Ashley watched from the sidelines, her whispered coaching forgotten, as she witnessed her husband's complete deflation. Brian, don't let him. Your husband isn't stupid enough to assault me, Ashley. I kept my eyes on Brian, reading his body language like construction blueprints. He knows the legal consequences. He also knows he's never been in a real fight. Brian's hands trembled slightly as he gripped the counter behind him. This isn't over, Gerald. Yes, it is. I returned to my paperwork, dismissing the threat as casually as I dismiss a subcontractor's unreasonable demands. Physical intimidation was your last viable tactic. It failed. The silence stretched across the kitchen like a measuring tape pulled too far. Ashley stared at her husband's retreating form, watching him slide along the counter toward the doorway. Her expression cycled through disbelief, fury, and something approaching panic. Pathetic. The word escaped her lips before she could stop it. Brian paused in the doorway, his face burning with humiliation. Ashley, you tried nothing. She turned on him with the fury she couldn't direct at me. You let a senior citizen back you down in 30 seconds. I gathered the legal documents into their folder, watching the family dynamics crumble in real time. The eviction notice remains in effect. 29 days, 13 hours remaining. Ashley's voice climbed toward hysteria again. Fine, if that's how you want to play this? She stormed toward the front door, grabbing her keys from the hook with violent determination. Where are you going? Brian called after her. To find someone who can actually help us. The front door slammed with enough force to rattle the windows Margaret and I had installed in 1999. Brian remained in the doorway, deflated and humiliated, looking like a contractor who just realized his bid was $20,000 too low. I opened my laptop and began typing. Time to cut off their financial oxygen. 2 hours later, I pulled into the driveway with a satisfaction that felt as solid as poured concrete. The bank visit had taken exactly 18 minutes, the same efficiency I'd applied to permit applications and inspection schedules during my construction years. Brian was still in the kitchen when I returned, nursing a beer and avoiding eye contact. Where did you go? He asked without real interest. Banking? I hung my keys on the hook where Margaret had always kept hers. Routine account maintenance. The lie wasn't really a lie. Removing Ashley's access to my money was routine maintenance, overdue maintenance that should have happened 3 years ago. Inside my jacket pocket, the bank documents confirmed what Jennifer Walsh, my account representative, had processed with professional discretion. Primary account holder rights. Secondary user privileges revoked. All cards and online access terminated effective immediately. Ashley's still out looking for help with this eviction thing, Brian offered, trying to sound casual. She'll probably be back soon. I poured myself coffee from the pot I'd made that morning, back when Ashley still believed she had unlimited access to my checking account. Help from whom? Legal aid, maybe, or her friend Madison, who works for that real estate company. Brian shrugged, clearly grasping at straws. Someone who understands tenant rights. Interesting approach. I sipped my coffee, watching him fidget with his beer bottle, though she might want to address her more immediate financial situation first. Brian looked confused. What financial situation? Before I could answer, Ashley's car pulled into the driveway with the aggressive speed of someone who'd spent 2 hours discovering that legal aid offices don't handle eviction cases filed by property owners with legitimate legal representation. She stormed through the front door, her face flushed with frustration. This whole legal system is rigged to favor property owners. Do you know how impossible it is to find someone willing to fight an eviction when... She stopped mid-sentence, noticing my calm expression and Brian's nervous energy. When what? I asked, genuinely curious about her afternoon education in legal realities. When the tenant can't afford a lawyer. She collapsed into the chair across from me, exhaustion replacing her earlier fury. Every attorney I talked to wanted $5,000 up front just to review the case. That seems reasonable for professional legal services. I opened my laptop, pulling up the banking app with deliberate casualness. Speaking of professional services, I had an interesting conversation at First National this afternoon. Ashley barely registered my words, too focused on her own failures. We need money for a lawyer, Dad. This eviction notice isn't going away just because we ignore it. You're absolutely right. I turned the laptop screen toward her. Unfortunately, you no longer have access to money for anything. She stared at the account summary, reading the notification banner with growing confusion. Account access restricted, secondary user privileges suspended. Her eyes found mine. What does this mean? It means I removed your name from my checking account. I spoke with the same matter-of-fact tone I'd used explaining change orders to confused contractors. No more debit card access, no more online banking, no more unlimited spending of my money. The words hit her like a failed foundation inspection. Ashley's face cycled through disbelief, confusion, and dawning panic as she pulled her wallet from her purse and stared at the debit card that no longer functioned. You can't just cut me off from our account. My account, I corrected. You were an authorized user, not an owner. Primary account holders can modify access permissions at any time. Brian leaned forward, finally understanding the scope of Gerald's strategic thinking. How are we supposed to buy groceries, pay for gas, basic necessities? Excellent questions. I closed the laptop with the same satisfaction I'd felt completing a successful project inspection. I suggest you find employment that provides income for those necessities. Ashley frantically grabbed her phone, pulling up her banking app. The login failed. She tried again with the same result. This isn't legal. You can't just steal our money. I haven't stolen anything. I've stopped giving you money. The distinction mattered, like the difference between load-bearing and decorative beams. Every dollar you've spent for the past 3 years came from my labor, my savings, my retirement fund. She stared at her useless debit card like a contractor staring at blueprints that no longer match the foundation. What do you expect us to do? Find jobs, pay rent, act like the independent adults you claim to be? I stood, gathering my coffee and legal papers. You have 28 days to figure it out. Ashley's voice climbed toward desperation. We can't survive without access to money. Then perhaps you shouldn't have demanded that your primary source of money sleep in the garage. I walked toward the door, leaving them to contemplate their new financial reality. Behind me, Ashley's phone rang, probably another legal aid office returning her call. 3 hours later, Ashley appeared in the garage doorway with the careful posture of someone approaching a dangerous construction site. Her earlier fury had been replaced by calculated humility, the same performance I'd watched from contractors trying to salvage projects after major mistakes. Dad? Her voice carried forced softness. Can we talk? I looked up from the insurance documents I'd been reviewing, noting her strategic choice to approach me in my designated space rather than demand my presence in the main house. About what? About everything that's happened today. She stepped carefully into the garage, hands clasped in front of her like a subcontractor preparing to explain cost overruns. I've been thinking about what you said, and I realize I was completely wrong. 30 years of construction work had taught me to recognize the difference between genuine remorse and tactical positioning. Ashley's apology sounded like a rehearsed presentation, delivered with the same desperate sincerity I'd heard from contractors facing bankruptcy. Wrong about which specific part? I kept my voice level, applying the same professional skepticism I'd used evaluating change order requests. The garage situation, demanding you move out of your own bedroom, her eyes filled with practiced regret. It was selfish and disrespectful, and I want to make this right between us. I set down my pen, studying her performance with the analytical approach I'd used assessing whether subcontractors could actually deliver on their promises. How do you plan to make it right? Well, obviously you should move back to your bedroom immediately. She spoke quickly, as if speed could overcome the shallow foundation of her concession. Brian and I can figure out alternative arrangements for his office space. Alternative arrangements. I repeated the phrase with the same tone I'd used when contractors offered vague solutions to specific problems, such as, Ashley's carefully prepared speech hit its first structural weakness. We'll work something out. Maybe convert part of the living room or use the dining room table for his computer work. And what about the fundamental issue of respect and financial exploitation? Her composure flickered like electricity during a storm. I know we've been dependent on your support, and I'm grateful for everything you've done for us. Grateful. I leaned back in my chair, watching her scramble for footing on unstable ground. $89,000 worth of grateful? That number feels exaggerated when you include normal family expenses. Every receipt is documented and categorized. I pulled out the financial summary I'd prepared. Would you like to review the calculations? Ashley's tactical humility shifted toward defensive justification, the same pattern I'd seen from contractors caught padding their bills. Family members help each other. That's what people do. Family members also respect property ownership and contribute to household expenses. I kept my tone conversational, the same approach I'd used explaining why certain contract modifications weren't acceptable. What specific changes are you proposing to address those issues? Her rehearsed apologies hadn't prepared her for detailed questioning. Brian's been working hard on his business development. Once his consulting firm takes off. 3 years of business development with zero income. I interrupted with the precision of rejecting an unrealistic project timeline. What's your backup plan? Maybe I could look for temporary work while Brian focuses on the business launch. I almost smiled at the familiar deflection. Temporary work to cover what specific expenses? Ashley's performance began unraveling under professional scrutiny. Basic necessities, I guess. Groceries, utilities, our share of household costs. Your share being what percentage of total household expenses? I don't know the exact breakdown. 47%. I pulled out the calculated figures, based on occupancy, utility usage, and consumption patterns over 3 years. The mathematical precision hit her like an unexpected change order on a fixed-price contract. Ashley stared at the numbers, clearly unprepared for the business-like evaluation of her vague promises. Dad, I'm trying to apologize here. Can't we work out some kind of arrangement that lets us stay while we get back on our feet? What guarantees can you provide for future behavior? I asked, applying the same criteria I'd used evaluating contractor commitments. What specific measurable changes will demonstrate this claimed transformation? Her desperation broke through the tactical performance. I just need access to the account restored so we can function while we figure things out. There it was, the real objective behind her manufactured humility. Ashley wasn't offering genuine change. She wanted temporary relief from consequences. I see. I closed the financial folder, watching her realize she'd revealed her true priorities. So your plan is to restore the status quo while promising eventual improvements. It's not like that. That's exactly what it's like. I stood, remembering every contractor who'd made similar promises under pressure. I've heard these negotiations before, Ashley. Different setting, same desperation. Her careful composure cracked completely. This isn't some business transaction. We're family. Family members don't force their fathers into garages. Ashley's frustration boiled over, into the anger she'd been suppressing. Fine. What exactly do you want from us? The question hung in the air like dust settling after demolition. Time to present the real terms. 2 hours later, I called them both into the living room, with the same formal tone I'd used summoning subcontractors to discuss contract violations. Ashley and Brian arranged themselves on the couch like defendants awaiting sentencing, their earlier confidence replaced by wary anticipation. This is my final offer for remaining in this house. I opened the legal pad where I'd outlined specific measurable terms. These conditions are non-negotiable. Ashley leaned forward, hope flickering in her eyes like a contractor hearing about potential change orders. Okay, what are you thinking? First requirement: complete financial independence within 60 days. I read from my notes with the precision I'd used reviewing construction specifications. Documented employment with verifiable income sufficient to cover all personal expenses. Her face shifted from hope to concern. 60 days isn't very much time. Second requirement: formal acknowledgement of property ownership rights. I continued without interruption. Written agreement recognizing my authority over all decisions regarding my house, including occupancy arrangements. Brian shifted uncomfortably. Gerald, maybe we could extend that timeline to something more realistic. Third requirement: financial reimbursement plan for documented exploitation. I pulled out the calculated figures. $89,000 in support, provided without consent or gratitude, repayable at minimum wage equivalent work hours. Ashley's mouth fell open. You want us to pay back money you gave us voluntarily? Money I provided under false pretenses. I kept my tone level, the same approach I'd used explaining cost overruns to stunned property owners, support given based on assumed temporary need, extended through manipulation and entitled demand. That's completely unreasonable. Ashley stood, pacing like a contractor, realizing their bid was catastrophically low. We're family, not business partners. Family members don't force their fathers into garages. I turned the page to additional requirements. Fourth condition: behavioral contract with measurable compliance standards. Behavioral contract? Brian asked, clearly uncomfortable with the terminology. Documented respectful behavior toward property ownership, elimination of entitled demands, contribution to household responsibilities. I looked up from my notes. Violations result in immediate eviction enforcement. Ashley stopped pacing, her tactical mind processing the impossible scope of genuine accountability. These aren't terms for staying, Dad. These are punishments designed to make us leave. These are the minimum requirements for adult behavior in someone else's house. I closed the legal pad, watching her realize the fundamental gap between her expectations and my standards. Standards I should have enforced 3 years ago. She tried one more angle, softening her voice into the manipulation that had worked so many times before. Can't we work out something more reasonable? Maybe start with smaller changes and build up to... No. The word hit the air like a final inspection failure. Gradual improvement has been your promise for 3 years, while the exploitation escalated. Brian cleared his throat nervously. What if we agreed to some of these terms, but adjusted the timeline? All requirements are final and immediate. I stood, ending the negotiation with the same finality I'd used closing unsuccessful project bids. Compliance begins tonight, or eviction enforcement begins tomorrow. Ashley's calculated humility cracked completely, revealing the entitled fury underneath. This is insane. You're treating us like criminals instead of your own family. I'm treating you like adults who made adult decisions and face adult consequences. I gathered my legal documents. Your response to these terms tells me everything I need to know about your commitment to genuine change. So, what's it going to be? Brian asked, though his tone suggested he already knew their answer. Ashley looked at the legal pad, at me, at Brian, then back at the impossible requirements for accountability and respect. Her silence spoke louder than any negotiation attempt. Fine. Her voice carried the cold finality of someone choosing confrontation over compromise. If that's how you want to end our relationship. I didn't end our relationship, Ashley. I walked toward the garage door, feeling the weight of completed business. You ended it when you demanded I sleep in my own garage. The legal pad remained on the coffee table between us like an unsigned contract. 27 days until sheriff enforcement. Though after tonight, I suspected we wouldn't need to wait that long. My phone rang as I reached the garage. Robert Stevens, probably wondering if we'd need to accelerate the timeline. Gerald, how did the final negotiation go? I looked back through the garage door at Ashley and Brian, huddled in furious conversation on the couch. Exactly as expected, I answered. They chose confrontation over accountability. Should I prepare the sheriff enforcement paperwork? Not yet. I watched Ashley gesturing angrily while Brian nodded along with her fury. Something tells me they're planning to escalate this themselves. Through the window, I could see Ashley reaching for her phone with the determined expression of someone calling in reinforcements. "Let me know when you need legal backup," Robert said. "Tomorrow morning," I replied, watching my daughter's face illuminate in the phone's glow. "I have a feeling things are about to get interesting." 30 days later, I watched from my kitchen window as the Franklin County Sheriff's vehicle pulled into my driveway at exactly 10 o'clock in the morning. Deputy Martinez stepped out with the same professional efficiency I'd admired in quality subcontractors, carrying the official eviction paperwork Robert Stevens had prepared a month ago. The legal process had proceeded with clockwork precision. No appeals, no delays, no last-minute negotiations. Ashley and Brian had spent their 30 days exactly as I'd predicted, hoping for a miracle that never came, making calls to lawyers they couldn't afford, and gradually accepting the reality that professional legal procedures don't bend to emotional manipulation. "Mr. Nelson?" Deputy Martinez approached with businesslike courtesy. "We're here to execute the court-ordered eviction. All documentation appears to be in proper order." I handed him the copies of every legal filing, each form completed with the same attention to detail I'd applied to construction permits for 30 years. "Everything you need should be there. The occupants have been properly notified according to Ohio statutes." Ashley appeared in the doorway behind me, her face pale but resigned. The fury and entitlement had burned out weeks ago, replaced by the hollow recognition that all her manipulation tactics had failed against systematic legal procedure. "How long do we have?" she asked the deputy, her voice carrying none of the demanding tone I'd heard for 3 years. "A standard time frame for personal property removal is 4 hours. Martinez replied with professional neutrality. "We'll supervise the process to ensure compliance with the court order." Brian emerged from the bedroom carrying boxes they had obviously prepared in advance. No dramatic protests, no final emotional appeals. They'd finally learned that legal authority doesn't negotiate with feelings. I remained in the kitchen, drinking coffee from Margaret's favorite mug, watching the methodical restoration of order to my property. The moving truck they'd rented sat in the driveway like a concrete mixer on a construction site. Practical equipment for a necessary job. Deputy Martinez supervised the loading process with the same professional detachment I'd used managing difficult projects. No unnecessary drama, no personal involvement, just efficient execution of properly filed legal documents. "Where are you taking the child?" I asked Ashley as she carried Tommy's toys toward the truck. "Madison's letting us stay in her guest room until we figure something out." Ashley's response carried no accusation, no attempt to make me feel guilty. The fight had gone out of her completely. Tommy appeared at her side, confused but not distressed. 3-year-olds adapt to change more easily than entitled adults. "Grandpa Gerald, are we moving?" "Your parents are moving, Tommy." I knelt down to his level, remembering that none of this was his fault. "You'll always be welcome to visit me here." Ashley's eyes filled with tears, the first genuine emotion I'd seen from her in months. But she said nothing, just nodded, and continued loading boxes. 2 hours later, the truck was full, and the house was mine again. Deputy Martinez handed me the completions paperwork with the satisfaction of a job properly finished. "Eviction successfully executed," he confirmed. "Property is now restored to full owner control." Ashley stood beside the loaded truck, looking back at the house where she'd lived for 3 years without paying rent, without showing respect, without recognizing that generosity has limits. "I'm sorry it came to this, Dad." The apology was real this time. Too late, but real. "So am I replied, and meant it. Brian started the truck engine while Ashley climbed into the passenger seat. No final arguments, no threats, no promises to make things right. Just the quiet acceptance of consequences they'd spent 30 days avoiding. I watched them drive away down the street where Margaret and I had walked every evening for 27 years. The same street where Ashley had learned to ride her bicycle, where we'd waited for school buses and celebrated birthdays. Now it was quiet again. Deputy Martinez completed his paperwork and shook my hand. "Property disputes like this one usually get messy, Mr. Nelson. Your documentation made this about as clean as these things get." 30 years of construction work teaches you to keep proper records, I replied. After he left, I walked through my house, truly my house again, noting the spaces they had occupied. The dining room no longer cluttered with Brian's business papers. The guest room restored to its original purpose. My bedroom back where it belonged. On the kitchen counter, Ashley had left her copy of the house key. I picked it up and dropped it into the drawer where Margaret had kept spare keys for everything. Some doors, once closed, should stay that way. The coffee was still warm in Margaret's mug. I sat down at my own kitchen table and enjoyed the silence. 6 hours later, I stood in the doorway of my master bedroom for the first time in 5 years, holding fresh linens Margaret had bought the year before she died. The afternoon sunlight streamed through windows that no longer faced into a garage conversion or makeshift office space, just the oak tree we'd planted for Ashley's 5th birthday. Everything looked exactly as it should. My dresser against the north wall, Margaret's jewelry box on the vanity, the reading chair where I'd spent countless evenings with construction manuals and project specifications. The room felt larger somehow, as if reclaiming it had expanded the very walls. I stripped away the emergency bedding I'd been using in the garage, replacing it with sheets that smelled like the lavender sachets Margaret had tucked into every linen closet. Simple domestic tasks that felt like architectural restoration, returning each element to its proper structural position. The phone rang as I finished making the bed. Robert Stevens, probably calling to confirm the legal completion paperwork. "Gerald, how does victory feel?" "Quiet," I answered, smoothing the comforter with the same precision I'd used leveling foundations. "Professional. No regrets about the family situation?" I looked around the bedroom where Margaret and I had planned Ashley's future, where we discussed college funds and wedding expenses and grandchildren. I regret that it became necessary. I don't regret that it worked. "The legal process performed exactly as designed," Robert observed. "Property rights protected, proper procedures followed, appropriate consequences delivered." "Like a well-built house," I agreed. "Strong foundation, quality materials, professional execution." After hanging up, I walked through each room methodically, noting the restored order. The dining room table clear of Brian's endless business plans. The living room arranged for actual living rather than storage. The guest bedroom returned to its intended purpose. In the kitchen, Margaret's coffee mug sat clean in the dish drainer where I'd left it that morning. 5 years ago, I'd drunk coffee from that mug while Ashley demanded I finance her wedding. Today, I'd used it to toast my own independence. The garage still held my workbench and tools, but now they served their original purpose, building and fixing things rather than housing an exiled homeowner. I'd already started sketching plans for the workshop expansion I'd wanted to build before Ashley and Brian moved in. 30 years of construction work had taught me that the most satisfying projects were restorations, taking something damaged or misused and returning it to proper function. Today felt like the completion of my most important restoration project. The house phone rang again. This time, an unfamiliar number. "Mr. Nelson, this is Madison Walsh. Ashley asked me to call you." Margaret's jewelry box caught the late afternoon light as I considered whether to hang up. What does she want? "She wanted me to tell you that she understands now. What you did, why you did it." Madison's voice carried careful neutrality. "She said to tell you that she's looking for work, and Brian started applying for actual jobs today. Good for them. She also wanted you to know that Tommy asks about you every day. He keeps asking when he can visit Grandpa Gerald's house again." This conversation required more consideration than sheriff's deputies or legal procedures. Tommy's welcome anytime Ashley wants to bring him by. Normal visiting hours, like any other grandparent. "She'd like that? Maybe next weekend?" "Saturday afternoon works fine." I kept my voice neutral, professional. 1-hour visits until we establish new patterns. "I'll let her know. Gerald, for what it's worth, I think you did the right thing." The call ended with the same business-like closure I'd used completing construction contracts. Clear terms, reasonable boundaries, professional expectations. Evening settled over the neighborhood as I prepared dinner in my own kitchen, using my own table, in my own house. The silence felt profound after 5 years of constant negotiation and conflict. No demands for money, no entitled assumptions about my resources, no manipulation disguised as family loyalty. Just the quiet satisfaction of restored order. Margaret's photograph smiled at me from the mantel, surrounded by the same family pictures that had always been there. Before Ashley learned to weaponize sentiment and Brian discovered the profit potential in helplessness. Tomorrow, I'd call the contractors about that workshop expansion. Maybe explore some travel plans I'd postponed for 5 years. Investigate volunteer opportunities that didn't involve subsidizing adult children's lifestyle choices. Tonight, I'd sleep in my own bed, in my own room, in my own house. Some victories taste better than others. This one tasted like freedom. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.